Hello everyone. Today we're diving into a deeply controversial case in the US where the line between victim and perpetrator becomes incredibly blurred. This story isn't just about a crime, it's a wake-up call about the failures of the justice system and the devastating impact of ignoring victims of abuse. Let's travel back to 2014 in Lawrence, Kansas, to uncover the shocking truth behind this case. It all began on a cold winter day, January 17, 2014, when the Douglas County Sheriff's Office in Kansas received a frantic call from a worried mother. She reported that her daughter, Sarah Gonzales-McLinn, a 19-year-old, had been missing for 3 days with no contact. The police immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and launched an investigation. Their first lead was that Sarah had been living with a man named Harold Hal Sasko before she disappeared. Hal Sasko, 52, was a divorced man with twin daughters. He owned 3 Cece's Pizza restaurants in Lawrence and Topeka and was financially well off. Sarah first met Hal when she was just 14, working part-time at one of his pizza shops. Sarah had grown up in an unhappy family, lacking love and support from a young age. At 16, her parents' divorce left her deeply scarred, feeling isolated and lost. During this vulnerable time, Hal stepped in, becoming a father figure and emotional support for Sarah. After graduating high school, Sarah accepted Hal's invitation to live with him at his home in Lawrence. At first, their relationship seemed close, almost like that of a father and daughter. But as the police investigated Sarah's disappearance, they uncovered a suspicious detail. Hal had also vanished at the same time as Sarah. This coincidence raised a chilling question. Had Hal abducted Sarah? The police quickly went to check Hal's house. From the outside, the house was eerily quiet, as if no one was home. After knocking with no response, the police decided to break down the door. The moment it swung open, a strong smell of blood hit them, leaving everyone in shock. The scene inside was even more horrifying. The room was in chaos, with broken beer bottles scattered across the floor. In the middle of the living room lay a man's body, motionless, his face pale, his hands and feet bound. A deep gash across his throat had nearly severed his windpipe, with blood pooled in large clots on the floor. On the wall opposite, the word freedom was written in blood, adding a chilling layer to the already gruesome scene. An initial autopsy confirmed the victim was Hal Sasko. The killer had acted with extreme brutality, nearly decapitating him. Strangely, despite the obvious pain Hal must have endured, there were no signs of a struggle on his body. The forensic team discovered a large amount of sedatives in the beer bottles at the scene, indicating the killer had drugged Hal before the attack. This was clearly a premeditated murder, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. The police only discovered her phone on the kitchen counter, and Hal's car was missing along with her. The case grew more mysterious, with a series of unanswered questions. Sarah was missing, Hal had been brutally murdered, and the word freedom was scrawled in blood on the wall. At first, the police theorized that the killer might have been an enemy of Hal's who abducted Sarah after the murder and fled in Hal's car. If true, Sarah was in grave danger. To solve the case quickly, Kansas police issued a nationwide alert for Hal's vehicle. Thanks to coordinated efforts, there was a breakthrough. Hal's car was spotted on a Kansas highway on January 14th, later crossing the Oklahoma state line that same afternoon. Coincidentally, on the afternoon of the 14th, Sarah had tried to contact her grandmother. The call was made from a convenience store along the route the car had taken, a hopeful sign for both the police and Sarah's family that she was still alive. However, when the police reviewed the convenience store's security footage, they were baffled. The footage showed Sarah acting alone, with no signs of coercion or anyone else with her. Sarah was the one driving Hal's car. As the police grappled with this confusing discovery, Greg Kelly, Hal's nephew, provided a disturbing piece of information that made everyone pause. About 1 to 2 months before the murder, Kelly had visited his uncle's house. Only Sarah was home at the time. He noticed a skinned rabbit in the fridge, and Sarah seemed oddly fixated on it, insisting on showing Kelly how to stab a knife through its throat. She claimed it was an important survival skill. Her strange behavior unnerved Kelly and raised red flags, so when he learned of his uncle's murder, he immediately reported the incident to the police. Kelly's account made the police think of the wound on Hal's throat. Additionally, Sarah's co-workers revealed she had taken several days off, claiming a family member had passed away, but after investigating, the police confirmed this was a lie. Sarah had fabricated the story. Could Sarah be the real killer? The police had to re-evaluate the entire case, shifting their focus to Sarah, the 19-year-old, from a potential victim to the prime suspect. After a week of intense searching across multiple states, the National Park Service apprehended Sarah near Miami, Florida. She was sightseeing at Everglades National Park, completely unaware that the police had surrounded her. When arrested, Sarah's calmness shocked many. It was hard to believe she was the perpetrator of such a horrific crime. On January 26, 2014, Detective Jamie Lawson from Florida conducted a 3-hour interview with Sarah. During the interrogation, Sarah didn't deny the crime. Instead, she willingly recounted the entire process of the murder. She said, "I'd wanted to get rid of him for a long time. That day, I decided to go through with my plan. I took time off work beforehand. Around 5:30 p.m. on January 13, 2014, I crushed sleeping pills and mixed them into a beer for Hal to drink. Once he started to pass out, barely conscious, I tied him to a chair and used a knife." As she recounted these details, Sarah remained completely calm. She also explained that her trip to Florida wasn't an attempt to flee, but simply a desire to see the ocean one last time before her arrest, knowing she might never get the chance again. When asked why she wrote "freedom" on the wall, Sarah replied that it was her truest emotion at that moment. Later at trial, Detective Lawson recalled this conversation, noting that Sarah didn't seem like a cold-blooded killer, but rather a victim who had finally tasted freedom after years of captivity. After confessing, Sarah was swiftly transferred to the Kansas Supreme Court. Her preliminary hearing took place on March 16, 2014. At the trial, Sarah didn't deny killing Hal, but she raised a critical point. She suffered from severe mental health issues. The prosecution dismissed her claim as baseless, accusing her of fabricating the story to avoid accountability. To clarify the matter, psychologist Marilyn Hutchinson spent 17.5 hours evaluating Sarah. The conclusion was staggering. Sarah suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder, along with depression and anxiety. This revelation shocked everyone. At just 19 years old, how could she have such severe mental health issues? A deeper investigation revealed the root cause, a childhood filled with trauma. From a young age, Sarah had witnessed countless arguments between her parents, leaving her feeling insecure and unloved. Constantly moving schools during her teenage years made her condition worse. She never had the chance to make lasting friends, becoming increasingly withdrawn and isolated. At 16, her parents' divorce dealt a devastating blow to her already fragile mental state. Tragically, during this time, a neighbor also abused her, leaving cigarette burns on her body. Those scars weren't just physical, they became a lasting psychological trauma. From then on, Sarah developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and depression. Under the weight of continuous emotional trauma, Sarah developed 4 distinct personalities, and one of those personalities was responsible for Hal's death. Although experts confirmed Sarah's mental health condition, and the court acknowledged this didn't reduce her charges. The prosecution argued that Sarah's actions weren't a spontaneous outburst, but a carefully planned murder with clear intent. If her crime had been the result of an uncontrollable mental health episode, With no intent to kill, she might have avoided criminal responsibility. But the evidence showed Sarah's actions were deliberate, and she admitted as much herself. On April 8, 2015, the court sentenced Sarah to 50 years in prison without parole for first-degree murder. This meant she wouldn't be eligible for release until she was nearly 70. The sentence stunned the public. A 19-year-old girl had become a convicted murderer. Yet many wondered, why had Sarah acted so brutally toward Hal? All prior information suggested their relationship was close, almost like father and daughter. Even with her mental health struggles, there seemed to be no clear reason for her to kill Hal. Was there more to this story? The answer is yes. To understand someone's actions, we must look at the full picture of their motives and circumstances. On May 25, 2021, after 6 years in prison, Sarah appeared in court again. This time, the court reduced her sentence from 50 years to 25 years. The decision sparked immediate controversy. Why had her sentence been cut in half? There had to be careful consideration and solid evidence behind the court's ruling. As public confusion grew, the Kansas Reflector published court records, confidential police documents, and other related information. The truth behind the murder was finally revealed, completely changing how people viewed Sarah's actions. It turned out Hal Sasko wasn't the kind father figure Sarah had once believed him to be. He was a depraved predator who had abused Sarah for a long time. After graduating high school, Sarah accepted Hal's invitation to move into his home as a tenant. At the time, the young girl with a bright smile on her face had no idea of the nightmare awaiting her. Hal's house was filled with alcohol and drugs, all of which he provided to Sarah for free. This was just the first step in his manipulative plan. He pretended to care, claiming they'd live together to look out for each other, and that he'd treat Sarah like his own daughter. But Hal's true goal was to exploit Sarah's dependence to control her. 6 months later, Hal's mask of kindness fell away, revealing his true nature. He began making advances toward Sarah. When she refused, he turned to threats, telling her that if she wanted to keep living there, she'd have to pay with her body. This sudden betrayal shattered Sarah. To her, Hal had always been a father figure. Desperate for love and a sense of family, Sarah closed her eyes and endured the humiliation to stay close to the man she saw as a father. After assaulting Sarah, Hal began controlling every aspect of her life. He took her bank card, fabricated debts to intimidate her, and told her that if she tried to leave, she'd end up homeless. Under this physical and emotional oppression, Sarah had no choice but to endure, becoming a pawn in Hal's hands. The man who called himself her father even bragged to neighbors about having an amazing 18-year-old daughter. Hal forced Sarah to undergo a nose job, adding $6,000 to her so-called debt. Next, he wanted her to get a breast augmentation, but the doctor refused because she was too young. So Hal arranged for her to have a butt lift instead, tacking on another $10,000 to her debt. He told her she'd be free once she paid it all off. Over the 10 months she lived with Hal, Sarah was assaulted 2 to 3 times a week. Unable to face the reality of her situation, she turned to alcohol and drugs to escape. By late December 2013, Sarah's mental state had deteriorated. She left a Google search history asking, "Why are my thoughts so strange?" She also texted her sister, saying she felt like a caged animal about to lose her mind. Sarah couldn't face Hal, nor could she face herself. The months of abuse had completely broken her already fragile mental world. A dark thought began to take root in her mind. On the morning of January 13, 2014, Hal pretended to apologize to Sarah for his assaults. But at 5:15 p.m., he texted her to put beer in the fridge. Sarah knew what would happen next. After drinking, Hal would assault her again. It was a familiar pattern she'd endured countless times, but this time she refused to take it anymore. Sarah laced the beer with sleeping pills. After drinking, Hal fell into a deep sleep. That midnight, Sarah ended the life of the man she had once seen as a father. Immediately after the murder, police found hundreds of violent pornographic videos on Hal's phone, many involving children. He had also tried to lure his own 16-year-old twin daughters to his house with gifts like cash, clothes, phones, and expensive motorcycles. In Hal's bedroom, police discovered a camera and a hard drive containing images of Sarah, though the contents were never released. Additionally, Hal's phone contained a selfie he had sent to Sarah. This evidence painted Hal as a depraved and dangerous predator. It's likely that from the moment he met Sarah at 14, he had targeted her, meticulously planning to push her into a dark abyss over the years. Yet all this evidence, which should have been presented at trial, was deliberately suppressed. Sarah had told her defense attorney, Kat Conley, about Hal's abusive behavior. But in a closed-door press conference before the 2015 trial, prosecutor Charles Branson argued that allowing the jury to hear about Sarah's abuse was unnecessary. He claimed those details were just a ploy to gain sympathy and were irrelevant to the case. He also didn't want Sarah's abuse to be made public, fearing that media coverage would compromise the trial's fairness. Shockingly, Sarah's defense attorney, Kat Conley, agreed with this stance. So at the trial, he focused solely on Sarah's mental health issues, completely ignoring Hal's horrific actions. After the preliminary hearing, Sarah was confused and devastated to learn her lawyer had failed to present evidence of the abuse she endured at Hal's hands. She said, "I don't want to escape responsibility, but I want a fair trial. If you don't tell the whole story, how can anyone judge what's fair?" After her conviction, the prison warden barred Sarah from speaking to the media, citing inconvenience to operations. He stated that only appropriate news topics would be allowed. Sarah didn't know who to turn to for help. She often felt ashamed and humiliated. Not only was she tormented mentally, but she also suffered physically. The discomfort from her forced butt lift surgery constantly reminded her of her painful past. In prison, Sarah persistently appealed, insisting that her lawyer had failed to tell the truth. Her determination eventually paid off as more people learned her story. Several individuals stepped forward to help, including Dave Ranney, a retired journalist. He met Sarah while volunteering as an advocate at the women's prison. After learning the full truth, he wrote an article questioning, "How could the jury convict Sarah without knowing the whole truth? It's unjust. The question isn't whether she killed Hal, it's why she did it. If you don't know the answer, ask those who've helped abused women. They'll tell you." Megan Steele, the executive director of a domestic violence victim support center in Lawrence, added, "When someone provides you with a comfortable life, meets all your needs, makes you dependent on them, and forces you to act according to their will, stripping you of your autonomy, that's abuse." The Kansas Reflector also posed a question in a related article. Why, when Sarah needed help the most, did no one step up to support her? And why, even today, has Kansas Governor Laura Kelly not considered clemency for Sarah? Sarah's defense attorneys conducted a detailed investigation and analysis of the case. They compiled the suppressed evidence from the trial and submitted it to the Kansas Parole Board, requesting a sentence reduction for Sarah. On January 12, 2021, the Parole Board forwarded Sarah's clemency petition to higher authorities. On May 25, 2021, after reviewing all the documents, the court decided to reduce Sarah's sentence from 50 years to 25 years. Susan Vess, the newly elected Douglas County prosecutor, reached an agreement with Sarah. Her sentence would be halved in exchange for Sarah waiving her right to appeal the reduction. Anissa Sasko, Hal's ex-wife, said, "Every time the media covers this case, my daughters and I have to relive that nightmare. I think Sarah should stay in prison. She chose to stay and kill someone. A cruel, deliberate act. She nearly decapitated my husband. I just want people to care about the real victims in this case and understand that we live with this pain every day because of her actions. However, many believe this young woman deserves a second chance at life. After all, from another perspective, Sarah is also a tragic victim. In a phone interview, Sarah shared that she regretted her actions the moment she committed the crime. She knows the pain has spread to many people, and if she could do it over, she would never have done it. Currently, Sarah is incarcerated at the Topeka Women's Prison. She often reflects on what happened to her, occasionally writing letters to God hoping for forgiveness. The prison has given Sarah an opportunity to work. She's now employed in the Training Services Division for the state of Kansas and has a lovable Labrador companion. These dogs have helped heal Sarah's psychological wounds in a unique way. Mental health experts have reassessed Sarah's condition, and their reports show her mental health has improved, indicating she's capable of leading a normal life. Sarah says that if she could speak to the governor, she'd prove she's no longer the desperate, confused young girl she once was. She's working hard every day to become a better person, for her family and for society. Finally, Sarah has stepped out of the darkness and into the light. Sarah's story, a young woman whose life was just beginning, yet who became entangled in a cycle of crime, both a victim and a perpetrator, forces us to reflect. Many condemn Sarah, arguing that her act of murder is unforgivable, no matter the reason. They believe reducing her sentence is an injustice to the victim and his family, pointing to the brutality of the crime and the fact that Sarah meticulously planned the murder. To them, Sarah is a dangerous criminal who needs to be isolated from society. But others sympathize with Sarah, seeing her as a victim of abuse, exploitation, and an unhappy childhood. They argue that her profound emotional trauma pushed her to a breaking point, leaving her unable to control her actions. To them, Sarah is more pitiable than blameworthy, deserving help to reintegrate into society. So, what's the truth? Can we judge Sarah in absolute terms, as simply right or wrong? Sarah's story reminds us that life isn't black and white, that behind every action lies deeper reasons and stories we can't see at first glance. Perhaps the lesson here is empathy and understanding. We need to learn to view situations from multiple perspectives, putting ourselves in others' shoes to grasp what they've been through. At the same time, this story serves as a warning about the epidemic of abuse and exploitation, highlighting the importance of protecting children and supporting society's most vulnerable. Don't stay silent. Don't ignore injustice. Speak up to protect those around you and yourself, because sometimes, even a small action can change someone's entire life. That's all for today's video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.